disciples came to him, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming?"
In these times, Jesus, the Son of God, foretold how people would know how to read the signs of the weather in the earth and the sky, but would not know what is happening in these days, in these last days. But the Holy Scriptures foretold the signs of the last days prophecies, and it's happening like the Bible said. And now we have this. In Jerusalem, Israel, the U.S. has now opened its embassy there with a ceremony of pomp and fanfare, with dignitaries speaking and prayers made to God. Jerusalem is one of the oldest cities in the world and is the holy city of the Holy Scriptures, where Israel's King David purchased a threshing floor to build an altar to God, which is now the Jerusalem Temple Mount. And it's where David also brought God's Ark of the Covenant. And then David's son, King Solomon, would build Israel's glorious temple in Jerusalem. And later, where a descendant of King David, in his humanity through Joseph and Mary, Jesus Christ, the divine Son of God, would walk and teach the true kingdom of God. And now the U.S. has made history, being the first country to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and having the first embassy of a country there. And as President Trump said in his comments to the ceremony officially opening the embassy, congratulations, it's been a long time coming. For there has been significant history around Israel and also the U.S. that eventually led up to this meaningful prophetic event of the U.S. Embassy opening in Jerusalem. Let's take a quick look at some of the history.
The State of Israel has an unusual capital that is not recognized by the international community. No country keeps an embassy in Jerusalem. This phenomenon is the product of history. Following the partition, the then British Mandate of Palestine in 1947, the UN General Assembly sought to divide the territory into two states, a Jewish one and an Arab one. Considering the unique cultural and religious significance of Jerusalem, the city was set aside as a separated body under UN trusteeship. That political status remained the international consensus even after the partition plan fell apart with Israel's declaration of independence in 1948 and the subsequent invasion by the Arab states. The following year, an armistice divided British Palestine in what became known as the Green Line, which cut through the middle of Jerusalem. Israel established its seat of government in the western half of the city, while Jordan took control of the city's eastern half, which hosted the Old City of Jerusalem. The Old City includes the Temple Mount religious compound, which houses the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. Meanwhile, the limestone Western Wall, which is the remnant of the wall that surrounded the Temple Mount, marks the holiest site in Judaism. The site of the Dome of the Rock is where Muslims believe that Muhammad began his ascent to heaven, and where Jews believed Abraham tried to sacrifice his son. Elsewhere in the Old City is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which marks a holy site for Christians of all denominations. This religious compound, as well as East Jerusalem and the West Bank, was captured by Israel following the Six-Day War in 1967. Immediately after, Israel started building settlements in the contested West Bank. Although the Israeli government does not have complete control over the settlements, it has never expressed an intention to amend its settlement policy because they became part of the country's defensive strategy. At the same time, in East Jerusalem, the Arab residents were given a special status. However, policies concerning the demography, construction, and security all served to strengthen the Israeli population. This brief overview of the historic events does not illustrate the human tragedy that left a deep impression in the identities of the involved communities. The conflict entered a political phase in the 1980s. Resolution 478 of the United Nations rejected Israel's declaration that Jerusalem was its complete and united capital. As a result, the United States, like all countries that have relations with Israel, kept its embassy in Tel Aviv to claim neutrality in the peace talks. The peace deal came close to realization during the Oslo Accords of 1993, which created the Autonomous Palestinian Authority. The agreement stipulated that the status of Jerusalem would be settled in a permanent peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Other key issues concerned the fate of the borders, security, and refugees. As a counter-response to the Oslo Accords, pro-Israeli groups in the United States sought to enhance Israel's bargaining position by legally requiring the U.S. government to relocate its embassy to Jerusalem. This resulted in the Jerusalem Embassy Act of 1995, which required the State Department to open an embassy in the city. However, the bill included a provision that allowed a presidential waiver. As such, past U.S. presidents signed executive orders every 6 months to delay the relocation, since doing so would be in breach of UN resolutions. Every president signed the waiver, until Trump. President Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel on December 6th and directed the State Department to move the embassy there. The planning, funding, and logistics won't happen overnight, but the United States is the first country to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Distinguished guests and dear friends, Tammy and I welcome you to the opening and dedication of the United States Embassy in Jerusalem, Israel.
So now the U.S. has recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and has moved its embassy there. But the USA opened up something more than just an embassy in Jerusalem. The USA has also opened up a pathway into the future of last days biblical prophecy around Israel and Jerusalem. This was a prophetic game changer that validated Israel, providing Israel the platform for worldwide recognition of their legitimate historical rights to Jerusalem, putting them in a stronger position for a coming agreement in the Middle East that will also give them a last days temple at Jerusalem. You see, the U.S. has made its choice to support and align with Israel, but that also disqualifies the U.S. from being an impartial Mideast peace negotiator for the future in the eyes of the world. And this event and the reactions to it by the Arab Muslim states, the Jewish state, the UN, the European Union, the Vatican, and all of the Western and Eastern hemispheres, it is moving them all into their positions to be onto the biblical path that leads to a future of prophecy fulfillment. For the U.S. Jerusalem decision has opened the prophetic door where the world will now turn to someone else who is the one biblically qualified according to the prophecies. And we go down into more details on this with more from the prophecies, history, and current events, and a new resource we have called USA and Jerusalem, the Coming Peace, Temple, and Antichrist, which is on our website, signsofTheLastDays.org. And in this resource, we describe how the USA has now triggered a prophetic force that will cause the world to go down a course, resulting in Middle East peace negotiations that lead to the rise of one to the forefront, to step into their prophetic role to facilitate the world forward into a prophesied peace agreement with Israel, triggering the events around Daniel's 70th week prophecy around Israel and Jerusalem. There will be a Middle East peace agreement that will happen between Israel and the other parties. And we describe the consensus of the prophecies in this new resource, USA and Jerusalem, the Coming Peace, Temple, and Antichrist. We describe how the consensus of the prophecies foretell who will accomplish it, where they come from, and what will happen afterwards in the future concerning Jerusalem, Israel's last days temple, and a one-world government and leader that brings the world into great tribulation from Jerusalem. As Jesus said, it's important to know what is happening in these last days. It's important to learn how to realize the events happening now, how they are signs showing the world is on the very precipice of major end-of-the-age prophecy fulfillment that will bring about the coming of Jesus Christ. And the USA recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, placing its embassy there, is a major sign which the USA has now pointed the world down into the last days prophecies that centers on Jerusalem. Go now to the website, signsoftheLastDays.org, and learn more about the signs of the last days prophecies.